I just flip the switch. Flip, flip. I don't know nobody else that's doing this. Body start to drop, ayy. Hit the floor.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shaken our economies and societies to the core and shown us how vulnerable we are to biological threats. In the digital world, similar risks are being overlooked right now. A cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics would spread faster and further than any biological virus. Its reproductive rate would be around 10 times greater than what we've experienced with the coronavirus. To give you an idea, one of the fastest worms in history, the 2003 Slammer sapphire worm, doubled in size approximately every 8.5 seconds, infecting over 75,000 devices in 10 minutes and almost 11 million devices in 24 hours. Fortunately, at least until now, cyber attacks have not impacted our health the way pandemics have, but the economic damages, and therefore the impact they have had on our daily lives, have been equal and sometimes even greater. You see, the only way to stop the exponential propagation of a COVID-like cyber threat is to fully disconnect the millions of vulnerable devices from one another and from the internet. All of this in a matter of days. A single day without the internet would cost our economies more than $50 billion, and that's before considering the economic and societal damages should these devices be linked to essential services such as transport or healthcare. As the digital realm increasingly merges with our physical world, the ripple effects of cyber attacks on our safety just keep on expanding at a faster pace than what we're preparing for. COVID-19 was known as an anticipated risk. So is the digital equivalent. Let's be better prepared for that one. The time is now.
In terms of the things that we're looking at, it's the things we've already talked about to some extent. It's the emergence of a new variant that could lead to significant economic. If there were to be a variant, for example, that were quite resistant to vaccines, it could have another significant effect on the economy. We don't see that. We don't have any basis for thinking that the new variant that we have is that one, but it's certainly one we're looking at. I would say, cyber risk, the risk of a successful cyber attack is, for me, always the most, one that we would be very difficult to deal with. I think we know how to deal with bad loans and things like that. I think more a cyber attack that were to take down a major financial institution or financial market utility would be a really significant financial stability risk that we haven't actually faced yet. So I could go on with a list of horribles, but I think that's a decent picture of where I would start.
I'm putting my ass on the line. I'm telling you, there is a black swan event coming. A black swan event coming. I don't know if we're going to war with Putin. I don't know if another corona is going to come out that is not curable. I don't know whether the Federal Reserve is going to finally implode. I don't know what it is, but it's coming. Because every massive bull market needs to find an excuse to correct. And even though we had a recession that only lasted 70 days or 80 days or whatever it was, last year, the market is way, 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 way overvalued. Excuse me. And the big smart money, if you follow it, which you don't, 95% of them have all taken money off the table. In other words, taken a lot of profits.
One thing that maybe surprised you most, something you learned the last year?
Well, I learned that people don't know as much as they think they know. But the biggest thing you learn is that the pandemic was bound to occur, and this isn't the worst one that's imaginable at all. Society has a terrible time preparing for things that are remote but are possible and will occur sooner or later. There'll be another pandemic. We know that. We know there's a nuclear, chemical, biological, and now cyber threat. And we know, each one of those has terrible possibilities. And we do some things about it. but it's just not something that society seems particularly capable and fully coming to grips with. The cyber threat, that we've just started.
There will be another crisis. It will be more significant. And, we need to actually start preparing for that now. When we do see this next crisis, it will be faster than what we've seen with COVID. The exponential growth rate will climb, be much steeper. The impact will be greater. And as a result, the economic and social implications will be even more significant.
Even more significant. What is this next crisis that we just heard Jeremy Jurgens, Harvard-educated managing director of the World Economic Forum, describing? Well, now let's hear from Klaus Schwab himself.
We all know, but still pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack. To use the COVID-19 crisis as a timely opportunity to reflect on the lessons the cybersecurity community can draw and improve our preparedness for a potential cyber pandemic.
Yes, a cyber pandemic. And before we even talk about what that is, I just want to again appreciate that we just heard two leaders of the World Economic Forum promise that we are going to have a new crisis soon that dwarfs COVID, which has already spelled the end of the world as we know it. So this is something severe, and we need to take notice.
Look at this. One thing we have to remind ourselves about is that the last time Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum was talking about a pandemic, one happened a year later. Yeah, don't believe that. It's still true. And now Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum are talking about the possibility of a cyber pandemic. We've even heard the guy say that it could make the pandemic we just are coming through now look like a small disturbance. The simulation that they're going to do, and starting yesterday, calls for a complete halt of the power supply, transportation, supply chains, hospitals, and banking. How about that one? It's interesting. And then if we move on here to look at it, you go under ISO 20022, and we see that they highlight, that ISO 2022 includes Algorand, XDC, Ripple, right? That's pretty amazing to me right there. And if we go on, let's keep going here. We see Cyber Polygon here, and actually I wanted to go to this because he's got the actual screenshot from it. This is averting a cyber pandemic, just to show you Davos agenda. Here it is, right here. He's showing you. There it is. And one more, which is the highlight from this, from Cyber Polygon. The project is a part of the World Economic Forum Center for Cybersecurity Platform. Digitalization is accelerating everywhere. New digital ecosystems are forming all around us, creating unnoticed linkages across services and supply chains as the world grows more interconnected. The speed development makes it difficult to assess the impact of change. A secure approach to digital development today will determine the shape of our future, decades to come, having the right skills in place to protecting organizations from attack now. I get it. Okay. When I think of all of this stuff and I come back to this whole idea, I'm reminded of this. And I want to start with this one right here, which is an old diagram from Swift that showed their go live schedule. And if you look at this, and I'm sorry, it's a little bit blurry here. It's an old image that I had, but this is prior to the pandemic. They were wanted to go live to some degree in November of 21. Now, of course, we've had the pandemic, but that doesn't mean that they still couldn't achieve some of these things, because as you see, some of these things are in different phases of implementation, right? So there is that to boot as well. But let me show you another diagram, because this does say go live in November 21. It does line up with the article that came out 2 days ago. But however, full disclosure, we have this diagram to look at as well. And it shows here in the gray, TMP go live, right? In the testing phase is the dark blue or black, whatever you want to call it there. The light blue, structured address data requirement. And in the light gray here again, we see key migration go live dates. Here it shows deployment of transaction manager, start of coexisting phase in November 22. The end date remains unchanged. So now here's a date. It looks like it's had an adjustment here, right? So, and then if you look down here, earliest go live date in November 2023, the exact timeline will be confirmed by the end of 2020. So again, there's some play here between 2021 and 2023, but I think what's interesting, if you look down here, Bank of England introductory phase in April 2022, enhanced phase in February 2023. So you can see they even talk about, just with that one particular entity, there's a couple different phase-in points, and it may be software to using an asset, right? And I'm just, putting an example there. I don't know that it is, but the reality here is it does say Eurosystem Big Bang in November 2022.
You have a long military experience. You also write fiction books that are based on the reality of the future of warfare. When you hear him talking about paralyzing our financial systems, our infrastructure systems, transportation systems, is that a real potential reality for the United States?
Yeah, Martha, it is. And also, I served as Secretary of Transportation of the state of North Carolina. So seaports, I had 72 airports I was in charge of, all the highways there. You think about what General Kellogg was just talking about, these attacks, these cyber attacks that can happen, that can shut down commerce at a seaport, that can change the Amber Alert on a highway, that can scare people. Think about what happened in Hawaii that time that there was a false alert that a missile was inbound to Hawaii. All of those things, the enemy can penetrate, as they demonstrated with the Colonial Pipeline and the meat processing plant and so forth. And so our infrastructure right now is a key vulnerability, in the state and local governments in particular have a hard time with, they don't have a lot of money to spend on cyber defense. And so when we think about cyber warfare, we have to think in terms of defense and also, how we hunt forward, what we do to be able to disrupt enemy around the world that are trying to attack us and do these things. And it's, as General Kellogg said, it's a silent enemy. It's a really tough enemy to get after, because you really don't know about it until it's been done. And it's so classified that we really can't talk about tactics, techniques, and procedures as well. And as far as entering into bilateral agreements, why would an enemy that's really perhaps got an advantage on us, asymmetric advantage, give away their state secrets? Why would they trade off when, we're the, United States, most powerful country in the world? Why would somebody say, okay, we're going to enter in this agreement that prevents us from debilitating you, when in fact our whole purpose is to debilitate the United States?
How good are we at retaliating is the question. So if they're able to take down the Colonial Pipeline, can we do the same thing in Russia?
We can, but we're the good guys. We fight with one hand tied behind our back. We don't go after other countries' critical infrastructure except in a time of war.
The part is it's going to be very, very tough to work with other countries because we're so unique in our capacity and capabilities. But let me just do a quick jump to what you just asked about, because it's almost, where I come from, it's almost like a 51-49 split, cyber and bio warfare, because both of them are attacks from the unknown. They're just like, as the President Trump used to say, it's a silent enemy. And you have to address both. And you made a very good point about the future of warfare. We've come a long ways from crossbows and bows and arrows to gunpowder to nuclear. This is a new level of warfare that we had not seen before. And I think we need to start thinking about it, hard about it, because look what happened with the coronavirus that we're talking about. I mean, the potential of that coming inadvertently out of a lab as a bioweapon, it killed millions of people, over 600,000 in the United States. And then you see what happened with the cyber attack and the ransomware attack. attack on Colonial Pipeline, and I live in Northern Virginia, and I saw what happened when the pumps were shut down and the panic buying was going on. If you combine both of those attacks of an enemy, you can shut down a nation pretty well. And I think we have to address that, and we have not done it. The words that President Biden talked about are a lot of words. I don't think he's figured it out yet, and I think somebody needs to sit down and say, okay, we are moving into a whole new area of warfare that we really hadn't thought about, and you can't look at them in silos. You can't say, okay, just talk about cyber warfare or just talk about bio. You're going to have to combine them both, because if I was an enemy, I would hit you with both simultaneously, and I'd break your back that way.
This is General Jack Keane talking about the private sector and the impact on the private sector and the need to work together on preventing these cyber attacks. Watch this.
Critical infrastructure of the United States, which is largely in the private sector, except for our nuclear weapons, is very, very vulnerable. This is finance and banking, telecommunications, utilities and energy infrastructure, and all of our major transportation, air and ground systems, rail, etc. That is largely exposed.
Today I'm convening this meeting to follow through on my promise to secure crucial infrastructure and the networks that we've been talking so much about over the last period of time of the federal government against cyber threats. I will hold my cabinet secretaries and agency heads accountable, totally accountable, for the cybersecurity of their organization, of which we probably don't have as much, certainly not as much as we should have. We must defend and protect federal networks and data. We operate these networks on behalf of the American people, and they are very important and very sacred. We will empower these agencies to modernize their IT systems for better security and other reasons. We will protect our critical infrastructure, such as power plants and electrical grids. The electrical grid problem is a problem, but we'll have it solved relatively soon. We must work with private sector. The private sector is way ahead of government in this case, to ensure that owners and operators of critical infrastructure have the support they need from the federal government to defend against cyber threats.
For instance, again, when I was at Amex and we were doing stress testing, we were stress testing, what if the housing market collapsed this much and what would happen, et cetera. And I'm like, you know what? Honestly, that's not the next stress that's going to happen. The big next stress is the financial system is going to be hacked for 1 or 2 days, and there's going to be a pandemonium that's going to happen, and that's going to be the stress thing that's going to, it's not what happened, it is probably what is likely to happen going forward. And that wasn't part of the stress test, for instance. I think it's a big oversight, because I think, not to be pessimistic, I think it's likely that something like that could happen in our system. I hope it doesn't, but we face pretty serious opponents out there.
Right.
Imagine what that's like. You walk outside, you turn on your phone, there's no signal. You go back inside, you turn on the TV, no signal. You turn on the radio, no power. You turn on the faucet, no water. You turn on the fridge, no refrigeration, your food starts to spoil. You walk outside, cars pile up, no streetlights. In big cities, if you're in New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, DC, within 3 to 5 days, the food is gone from the grocery stores. And the trucks that the city counts on to resupply that food aren't coming. Within a week or two, the sewage system starts to overflow and contaminates what remains of the water supply, and people start getting cholera. Societal order starts to break down. There's mass evacuations. The emergency responders who during the first few days were desperately trying to evacuate people trapped in elevators have now left their positions like many did during Katrina to protect themselves and their own families. But why get depressed and worry about something like that if there's no way it could ever happen? There's no way we could ever experience a large blackout affecting the entire or a large portion of the United States of America. The unfortunate news is that the threat of such a blackout is very real. Now, there are a few things that we all know could disrupt life as we know it and make it very bad. Nuclear war, asteroid collision, aliens invading, a horrific disease pandemic, a giant plague. And when we think about those things, we get scared because they'd be very bad, but then we get comforted because there's a really small percentage chance they happen, and they're almost definitely not going to. And then we figure, you know what, it's not worth even thinking about this stuff because there's no solution to it. Well, the threat of a blackout, the threat of a prolonged loss of electric power is similar in one way and different in two to those other threats. It's similar because it's that scale of magnitude as far as how much damage it would do to our society and to the rest of the world, to the human race. But it is a non-trivial probability of occurring. And there's a lot we can do, but aren't, to prevent it. So, the news anchor, really famous guy, Ted Koppel, wrote a book about this issue, about grid security, and in that book, he compares the electrical grid to a big hot air balloon with a lot of vents. Some bring air in, some bring air out. And obviously, you need the right balance of air in and air out. If there's too much air in, it pops and the basket crashes. If there's too much air out, it deflates and the basket crashes. So Ted uses this to draw an analogy to the electrical grid. You've got to balance supply and demand. You've got to have the right amount of electricity in and the right amount of electricity out, or the whole thing stops working, potentially for a very long time. There are 4 ways that could happen. The first won't surprise you. It's a cyber attack. Anyone who reads the news will know that Russia and China already likely have that capability, that it's not too difficult for terrorist groups to acquire that capability, and that if North Korea can hack Sony Pictures, and if JP Morgan, which spends hundreds of millions of dollars a year on protecting its systems, can be breached, and Target can be breached, and Equifax can be breached, that the much smaller companies that run independent parts of the grid that control maybe just 1 or 2 or 3 of those flaps on our hot air balloon can be breached far more easily. And if you're a terrorist group, there's no threat of retaliation because where the hell are you? And there's no objective other than death and destruction. That kind of threat is why people like Janet Napolitano, who was head of Homeland Security under Barack Obama, put the threat of a cyber attack on the grid 70, 80, 90% likelihood over the next few decades. 2, solar weather. Every 100 to 200 years, the sun strikes the Earth with a big burst of energy known as a coronal mass ejection, a CME. The last big one was in 1859. It was known as the Carrington Storm. And it exploded a bunch of telegraphs. So that was the large stuff that relied on electricity. But society didn't care. Who needs telegraphs? Unfortunately, we really do need our national grid, a whole lot more than the people of 1859 needed telegraphs. One of these, a CME, a small one, hit Quebec in 1989. within 90 seconds, 6 million people lost power. Scientists predict there's about a 10% chance, a 1 in 10 chance of a large CME striking Earth within the next decade and taking out all or a portion of our national grid. Terrifying. 3, an electromagnetic pulse attack like the kind North Korea threatened us with just a week or two ago. The way that works is very simple. A big bomb, usually nuclear, goes up into the atmosphere, about 30 kilometers of height or greater, explodes, and emits a burst of electromagnetic energy that fries anything with electricity larger than about 1.5 feet. Computers down, cars down, motorcycles down. It was built after 1984. Disaster. 4, a physical attack. Our grid is a little like a hot air balloon, but it's also a little like the Death Star. Because if you hit it in the right spot, the whole thing explodes. Not really, but functionally, it stops working. If you take out just a handful, about 9, of the critical electric transformers, step up, step down power transformers, high voltage transformers across the country, of which we have a few thousand, you can take out the entire grid.
It's really like kind of scary if you think about it, and you just see in the movies too, they plan out cyber emergencies, and it's like, you know, the whole world turns upside down. And I mean, it's not really my theory, it's what central bankers are saying out in the open. That's what I find really concerning, is that it's like a known kind of thing that they're just speaking about, and maybe it's precautionary, or maybe that, you know, they have an idea of how it would come to fruition. It's just kind of scary to me, but we'll have to do everything we can in our power to protect what's ours.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And you know, I think the central bankers have the insight of all of the incidents that have occurred in the banking sector over the last decade or two, which is another great reason to implement something like cryptocurrency. Because if banks are, you know, if there's banks around the world that are getting successfully hacked, and I'm just presuming that, then cryptocurrency provides a really good solution in that it can be tracked, and if a bank gets hacked, those funds can be returned because you can see the ledger transactions.
Right, it's got a history of all the transactions in the ledger, and there's kind of like a restore point. If it's a private ledger, if it's a public ledger, they wouldn't be able to restore it unless they had the voting of everyone on the public blockchain. So that's also an interesting way to look at it, even with like whatever happens, and even in the banking world, but in trade or anything, if something goes wrong and it's on a private ledger, they can kind of restore everything. And that was kind of the reason I was interested in XRP to begin with, is I was researching just the SWIFT problems that they had in the past, and how, you know, they've lost billions and billions of dollars from attacks just on the SWIFT system. And I think we spoke about this earlier, is like the error rate with SWIFT is meaning vulnerability. It's just that error rate being so high, and with crypto, you're able to kind of protect these you know, sensitive information and money that way.
Excuse me. I'd like to start by saying a few words about the ransomware cyber attack currently impacting Colonial Pipeline. This is something that our administration, has been tracking extremely carefully, and I have been personally briefed every day. The Department of Energy is working directly with Colonial to get the pipelines back online and operating at full capacity as quickly and safely as possible. The FBI also is engaged to assess and address this attack. The agencies across the government have acted quickly to mitigate any impact on our fuel supply. And over the weekend, at my direction, the Department of Transportation issued an emergency order to loosen restrictions on truck drivers in order to allow more fuel to be transported by a tanker. We're prepared to take additional steps depending on how quickly the company is able to bring its pipeline back to full operational capacity. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has determined Colonial's network was infected by ransomware, and it's a criminal act, obviously. FBI released details of the attack so others can take steps to prevent being infected. My administration takes this very seriously. We have efforts underway with the FBI and DOJ, Department of Justice, to disrupt and prosecute ransomware criminals. And my administration will be pursuing a global effort of ransomware attacks by transnational criminals who often use global money laundering networks to carry them out. My administration is also committed to safeguarding our critical infrastructure, much of which is privately owned and managed like Colonial. Private entities are making their own determination on cybersecurity, so to jumpstart greater private sector investment in cybersecurity, we launched a new public-private initiative in April. It begins with a 100-day sprint to improve cybersecurity in the electric sector. And we'll follow that with similar initiatives in natural gas pipelines, water, and other sectors.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.
Saying, given the progress our IT professionals and plant teams have made in the last 24 hours, the vast majority of our beef, pork, poultry, and prepared food plants will be operational tomorrow. That is today, Wednesday. Who's behind this? Well, a source confirms to me this morning that the group behind this hack is called REvil. They're a well-known Russian-linked hacking organization. Here's what we know about REvil. They hacked the Apple supplier Quanta computer a couple weeks back. They demanded a $50 million ransom in that case. They're made up largely of native Russian speakers, and they post their stolen documents on the dark website that they call Happy Blog. So they have something of a dark sense of humor about all of this. And law enforcement and intelligence know a lot about people who are in groups like this. This is video released by the National Crime Agency in Britain. These are alleged members of another hacking collective called Evil Corp. You can see them doing donuts in Lamborghinis and Audis in Moscow. This is how these hackers are spending their ill-gotten gains. This is what happens when American companies are sending these ransom payments to these hacking groups in Russia. This is Evil Corp doing donuts in Moscow back in 2019, video released by the British National Crime Agency, which said that this particular hacking group was an enormous threat to the United Kingdom. So we see some links between the criminal underworld and the Russian government, but it's not at all clear exactly to what extent Vladimir Putin controls these people, if he does, or if he's just allowing them tacitly to operate inside his borders without prosecution. Therefore, messing with the West in general terms. They're hitting our food supply, our fuel supply, as we've seen over the past couple of weeks. All of that now will be grist for the mill for Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden in their summit in Geneva, which is coming up later this month. A lot to talk about at that meeting.
All right, we have new information this morning on 2 more cyber attacks targeting New York City's subway system and a ferry service for summer resorts in Massachusetts. This follows this week's attack on a giant meat processing company that owns dozens of U.S. brands. Jeff Begay's reports now on the growing pressure for the U.S. to strike back.
Less than 2 weeks from a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the White House says that all retaliatory options are on the table.
Mr. President, will you retaliate against Russia for this latest ransomware attack?
We're looking closely at that issue.
Meat processing company JBS is trying to get fully up and running after the cyber attack, which the FBI attributed to a Russia-linked ransomware operation known as REvil. The FBI says agents are working diligently to bring the threat actors to justice. The hack follows the ransomware attack last month on Colonial Pipeline, which led to the shutdown of the largest U.S. fuel pipeline and sparked panic buying at gas stations. Another ransomware attack Wednesday hit Massachusetts Steamship Authority, which runs ferries to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. And the New York subway system confirmed that it suffered a cyber attack in April. The New York Times reports the hack was linked to Chinese hackers, but the damage was contained.
There's really no preferred sector or segment of the economy of these ransomware actors.
Chris Krebs is the former director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. What is happening in the world that U.S. companies, U.S. government entities are such popular targets for these hackers?
You know, the unfortunate reality is that ransomware is a business and business is good. And until we can disrupt the profitability of the ransomware business model, these events are going to continue to happen.
R. Evil, the prime suspect in the JBS attack, is believed to have stolen hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. JBS is expected to resume production at all of its U.S. facilities. Anthony.
Jeff Pegues in Washington, D.C. Thanks.
Cyber attacks on the rise, and Biden just hands Putin a paper with our tenderest targets. Tonight, one of the world's most controversial hackers has a warning for the USA. We are in big trouble. Sabu Hector Masagur is a former hacker behind the anonymous Lulz hacking collectives. They attacked places like the Senate, Visa, MasterCard. They called themselves hacktivists. In 2011, Hector hacked the FBI, and he got caught. He became an informant, and after serving time in jail and being banned from the internet for years, he turned things around. Now, he hacks for good, to help people. Here with why the U.S. should be worried, former black hat hacker Hector Masagur. All right, Hector, what is the United States missing with this new cyber war it seems like we're now involved in?
Well, it's a great question. We do not have enough people to deal with the threats. We don't have enough law enforcement that actually understands cyber. And all of the organizations that I've worked with around the nation, and we see the news all the time, still haven't reached a certain threshold in their security posture. So we're going to continue to see these attacks just happen every day, and it's going to get worse and worse. It'll be exponential.
So remember we launched Space Force. Do we need like a new cyber war department, like a separate from the Department of Defense, just to beef up with a bunch of hacktivist people like yourself, maybe ex-black hat hackers, to show us what to do to handle these Russians?
Well, we do have CISA, right? And there's other organizations around there. We do have the computer emergency response teams and all sorts of organizations. The thing is that we kind of need to work together. I think that for a long time, the U.S. government has relied heavily on federal contractors, which I have no problem with for the most part. I think they've improved over the years, but we still need more outside help. That's for sure.
So from a strategic perspective, when Joe Biden hands Putin a list of our top 16 targets that we don't want the Russian hackers to touch, does that sound like something maybe we shouldn't have done from a former hacker's perspective?
Well, I don't think it's a good idea. But the truth of the matter is, and I'll be very honest with you, most of the sophisticated actors will go around those targets. So, yeah, they may have a list of 16 targets or more, but then they will find equivalents, counterparts within the same industries, and just target those and still create the same sort of chaos. Yeah, that's pretty much what we need to be concerned about.
So when you hacked the FBI, how'd they catch you?
Well, it wasn't necessarily attacking the FBI directly. It was, again, going around, right? You go around the target, and they called me because of bad operational security. I mean, I really didn't care to get caught, and that's it led to my downfall. I think at that point in my life, I wanted to be caught and, start my life anew. But one thing I would have to say, Mr. Waters, is that a lot of these threat actors, their modus operandi shifts pretty much daily. Their strategies and techniques, tools and procedures are constantly lifted from open source technologies or from each other. So it's very hard to make attribution claims for a lot of these attacks, which is problematic for not only the government, but for yourself as a journalist.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Hector. We appreciate it, and we're glad that you're on the straight and narrow now, because
thank you.
You could have hacked me, and I don't want any of my goodies getting out. It's a world of hurt. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Take care.
But I think it's more likely we're going to end up, if we end up in a war, a real shooting war with a major power, it's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence. And it's increasing exponentially, the capabilities. When I was with Mr. Putin, who has a real problem, he's sitting on top of an economy that has nuclear weapons and oil wells and nothing else. Nothing else. Their economy is what, the 8th smallest in the world now? Largest in the world? He knows he's in real trouble, which makes him even more dangerous in my view.
As we are preparing for one of the biggest geopolitical black swan events you could imagine. America's biggest banks are being warned and prepped for a possible cyber attack. Gold Telegraph warns to have some wealth outside of the banking system. And trust me, if you've been watching my channel, you have been ready for a long time for this moment. We are all ready. On the screen, it says the money in your bank account is one state emergency away from being the government's money. And what we're seeing in Canada right now is evidence of that. That is what a cashless society would look like. We've seen bank bail-ins across the planet currently already. Lebanon is an example. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most delicate financial time in history right now. We're on the precipice of massive change and massive uncertainty. And what I'm going to say to all of you is, take a few precautions. Be diversified. Have some physical cash on you. Stock up on food. Have precious metals if you can. And have cryptos on your offline wallets. Please. I've stressed this before and I'll say it again. I showed you in my last video how the Kraken CEO stated they can halt your funds on public exchanges if you do not control your own keys. It is not your crypto. Doesn't matter if you're just a normal citizen. This is what can happen. The governments right now are showing their hand, and you should believe them. Take control of your own finances and brace for what's about to come.
So you're confirming that accounts have been frozen, both personal and corporate, but you're not releasing the information. And the actual follow-up is, I'm just wondering whether the bank accounts will be targeted of individuals who donated to the Give, Send, Go and the GoFundMe campaigns. Are they considered designated people under the Emergencies Act, meaning that their credit cards could be cut and financial services are targeting them as well?
Okay, so the names of both individuals and entities, as well as crypto wallets, have been shared by the RCMP with financial institutions, and accounts have been frozen, and more accounts will be frozen. Crowdfunding platforms and payment service providers have started the registration process with FinTrack. In terms of the specifics on whose accounts are being frozen, you now have the regulations. The financial service providers have those regulations as well, and they, working with law enforcement, will be making the operational decisions.
In several parts of the world, bank runs have accelerated over the past few days after banking systems mysteriously started to go offline, raising fears that a potential system collapse is looming as geopolitical tensions rise all across the globe. Those who still think that these recent bank outages, closures, and disruptions were isolated events that will soon be fixed will probably be unpleasantly surprised to discover that this is part of the new normal. We have a lot to discuss today, so please don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to keep updated with future videos. Conditions in the financial system are making many people lose their trust in banks, especially now that interest rates hikes threaten to unleash a credit crunch similar to what happened during the 2008 financial crisis. But problems in the financial world go way deeper than most people think, and that's an extremely alarming situation for consumers who don't even know what they're truly in for. All over the world, and particularly in the United States, Canada, the UK, and China, thousands of bank branches have been suddenly closed since the burst of the health crisis. Banks say this is happening because people are still afraid to leave their homes and have been preferring to make their transactions using online platforms. Operational costs have also been going up, and banks tend to cut on expenses wherever they can. More and more routine transactions are taking place online or on your phone. So as a result, branch traffic is not only down significantly over the years, but it's also changed, explained Greg McBride, the chief financial analyst for Bankrate. In 2020, 2,126 bank branches were closed in the United States, according to S&P Global Market Intelligence. That was the highest number of bank closures ever recorded until 2021, when roughly 3,000 more branches disappeared from the system without further notice. From March 2020 to October 2021, over 4,000 branches were shut down. Nationwide, Wells Fargo closed a net 267 branch locations in 2020. That number escalated to 993 by the end of 2021, according to data released in a report conducted by the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. Last year, California had the highest rate of bank retail branch closures compared to any other state. Bank shutdowns jumped by 38%, accounting for a net loss of 269 banks. California was followed by Michigan with 247 closures and New York with 221. Rounding out the top five were Florida with 192 and Illinois with 153. This suggests that banks are simply rushing to close as many branches as they can, as quickly as they can, anywhere they can, the authors highlighted in the report. It is true that more people have turned to mobile and internet banking services in recent years, but those don't fully replace physical bank branches, explained Bruce Mitchell, NCRC Senior Research Analyst and co-author of the report. The story that banks are not telling us is that this shift to online services wasn't entirely a choice. In fact, since many local branches were closed overnight, it was the lack of choice that led many Americans to start using online banking. What no one seems to be talking about is that customers are losing access to ATM machines to withdraw their money and becoming increasingly vulnerable to online disruptions and even unannounced freezes on their assets. The closures are disproportionately affecting those who live in rural and remote areas, who oftentimes lack access to mobile banking and have a greater need for in-person locations. For local communities, this has been a total nightmare. For instance, one elderly local said in an interview that he's been struggling to access his account since he doesn't understand how online services work. I don't use the internet at my age. All the banks have shut down, and now there's only one here in town, said 80-year-old Peter Olverson. I think it's a disgrace, to be honest. The nearest bank closed down. Now at the only one that is open, you can't get served anyway because there are so many people going down there. I can use the internet, but I've turned 80 now. Basically, I do make mistakes. When I go online banking, I've got to be careful I don't press any wrong buttons. Bank branches are also responsible for fueling local economies, and Many nearby small businesses that managed to survive the past few years are now at risk of closing down since foot traffic continues to decline. And although that itself is a matter of concern, the main problem is that the reduced number of functioning branches and available ATM machines means that many people will not be able to get cash on their hands in case an emergency hits. People will not be able to have access to their savings or regular banking services if an outage occurs. On top of that, new rules backed by several global economies, including the US government, do not require major banks to ensure that communities will have access to cash when their last branch shuts. In Europe, that has sparked some fierce consumer backlash over the past couple of weeks, but strangely enough, this news has not hit the US headlines just yet. In the UK, some dissatisfied customers started to move their money from their accounts and into their crypto wallets, while others engaged in a bank run to take their money out of the system. As a result, several banks have seized people's assets and crypto portfolios amid growing fears that bank runs would continue to occur on a faster, greater scale, according to a recent report published by MarketWatch. To make things worse, banking insiders are warning that 700 to 800 branches will be closed this year in the United States alone, as high street banks continue to cut costs and attempt to speed up the process of digitalization, they said. There are going to be a lot of disappointed small businesses and angry branch-dependent customers once new branch closures start getting announced, said one banking source, adding that as a result of the new rules, they're going to think a white knight will come rushing to their rescue and insist that banks will fund the installation of a new cash machine in their community, or even a new style banking center that all bank customers can use. But it won't always be the case. The source also noted that in some cases, legislation has already been put in place to support these new rules. Banks will always look at ways to spend as little as possible on funding alternative banking services, he outlined. With all things considered, it's understandable why so many people out there have started to rush to withdraw their money from their accounts before more mandated interruptions are imposed by government authorities. In Canada, the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act last week, which is an exceptional measure for the enforcement of legal orders that would be otherwise considered illegal in a normal situation, for violating basic natural human rights, which are usually protected by the Constitution. As an immediate effect of the Emergencies Act, banks were authorized to freeze the bank accounts of anyone with an alleged connection to the recent demonstrations without the need for proof or legal judgment. But extensive outages in the country's banking system, reported just before the official announcement was released, suggest that the act was actually put in place to avoid widespread bank runs. Many local reports say that Canada's banks mysteriously went offline last week as millions of people started to try to withdraw massive amounts of cash from their accounts. This week, 5 banks in Canada, the leading ones in the country, went offline out of the blue, Tech Story reported Thursday. They faced a major outage of almost 5 hours, blocking access to their primary functions. Online and mobile banking facilities were said to be out, along with access to e-transfer for the customers. Banks mentioned technical difficulties in processing transactions, but on Twitter, Canadians told their own version of the story. System overload. 1 million Canadians decided they don't quite trust the banks anymore now that Trudeau is in charge of them. Was there a bank run? One user questioned. Do you think people will keep their money in institutions that now can easily freeze it from them? Another one answered. Meanwhile, in the United States, the government is afraid that the geopolitical conflict between Russia and Ukraine will lead to further disruptions in the operations of our big banks and utility facilities. Officials have been urging U.S. financial institutions and other critical infrastructure sectors, such as electric utilities, to be on alert for any potential cyber attacks. In short, as banking services enter the new digital era, customers are likely to face many more unexpected disruptions, considering that with one simple government order, they can totally lose access to their funds, and that the system is not shielded from cyber attacks and fraud. The truth is that banks aren't known for investing in damage control, but for spending their way out of a crisis after it bursts. The world's population is just now realizing that the system is much more fragile than it seems, and that in fact their wealth is not protected in their bank accounts. People typically put their money into a bank for a reason, to keep it safe. But if politicians can suddenly freeze your money for not complying with their rules, or if banks themselves cannot guarantee protection from fraud and hackers, the only obvious outcome for people is to take their money out and place it where it is safer. It won't be surprising if more bank runs start to occur in the near future. The global population is finally waking up to the reality that those very few people in positions of power can choose to confiscate the money we worked for during our entire lives with no good explanation for it. Keeping in mind that things are going from bad to worse in the financial markets, it's a good idea to start finding alternatives to protect our wealth before it all starts to fall apart around us. Our leaders won't come to rescue us, and it's safe to say that bank bureaucrats most certainly won't either. Thank you for watching.
I want to quote some things here. The banks are appealing for emergency liquidity assistance in a multitude of currencies to put to a halt the chaos as counterparties withdraw their funds and limit access to liquidity, leaving the banks in disarray and ruin. The participants discussed multilateral policies to respond to the crisis, including a coordinated bank holiday. A bank holiday, when they say coordinated, throughout the entire West, not just the Western Hemisphere, the entire West, all countries. Debt repayment grace periods, swap repro agreements, and, listen to this, coordinated delinking from major currencies. What does that mean?
I think that means they're trying to figure out a way to roll out an international currency. That's what I think it means. Probably an international digital currency, which is something that people in the Great Reset movement, like Mark Carney, who is heavily involved in many of these meetings that's been going on in Glasgow and elsewhere with the World Economic Forum, I believe that that's what they ultimately want, and that they're looking for a way to try to make this happen. And I think that they're running different scenarios for how this could occur, and these so-called cyber attacks and fake news, the proliferation of fake news causing some kind of financial catastrophe, supposedly, are some of the scenarios that they're thinking could be used as a way to roll out an international currency. I think that's the only way to understand what a coordinated delinking from major currencies is.
What does that mean to the average person, their savings, their salary, and everything else, if there's, quote, a major delinking from major currencies?
Well, what we've seen in the past is anytime there has been a switch to a currency, when they've gotten rid of an old kind of currency and they've moved to a new sort of currency. And this is every time we've seen this people lose 50% of the value of their money, essentially. Sometimes more.
That's when
dig a little deeper here. So, how much currency do you think is sitting in the banking system that can be tapped?
Probably about 1% of what the cover ratio is. In other words, the math shows about 5%. Half of that, or more, 60% is overseas. So that drops you to about 2.5%. But of that 2.5%, I cut it in half again, because half of the currency, the physical, you could touch it and own it, money, we'll call it, is in grocery stores, casinos, liquor stores, places of business that do cash business. So it's not in the bank. It's scattered out all over the United States in various businesses. So how much is actually in the bank when you, owning a bank account, go in there and say, hey, I've got 10,000 in this bank, I want it in cash. The chances of you getting it might be good. The next person, okay, and the third person, they're out of cash. I'm being a bit facetious, but you get the idea. It's a very, very small cover ratio.
I've been doing this for a very long time. I don't think I've ever seen a trend like this year where I have so many experts coming on, more and more people coming on telling me they're getting completely out of the banking system. So how, what's your exposure now, David, if you don't mind sharing? I know you mentioned you should have cash at home to make sure you can pay rent and whatever your basic expenses, but are you completely out of the system now?
I'm not. I have to have an account, the business account, to pay,
Right.
people that work with me. So not completely out, but no, I think there's really two methods here that most people are familiar with. One is the traditional privately held money, gold and silver. And the other, of course, it's been at the forefront for some time now, and that's the crypto world. So between the crypto world and gold and silver, there are a lot of people that have opted out because the idea that you have money in the bank, everyone takes for granted, but they don't read the fine print to realize they're an unsecured creditor. I'm talking about the United States now, an unsecured creditor to the bank. And it's really the bank's money, believe it or not. And what that means in a banking crisis, and let's say that there is a bail-in, then they have the right legally to take what you consider to be your money. So there's two thoughts on this. Number one is the ownership theory of money is you take out physical currency from your bank account, and you could do it in any way that's best for you. In other words, you don't have to withdraw your entire bank account in cash, but I would certainly consider owning some cash for a lot of various reasons. Electronic failure, cyber attack, bank closure, terrorist act, who knows? I look more toward electrical problems with the grid, perhaps, or cyber attack is the main two that concern me. And the other part is that I didn't really say to Greg, and that's, if you have a large sum in the bank and you're really just getting acquainted with the precious metals, one of the easiest ways to move money, quote unquote money, is to move it via a check or a wire and take X amount from your account and move it into physical metal. And that's what a lot of savvy people have done over the years that have listened to you on Stansberry. It's like, look, I need some protection. I need some what we call monetary insurance, some wealth protection. And I've got a lot of cash, but I don't have any metals. So that's one way to do it. The other part, again, I'll give it back to you, Danielle, is does it make sense to take some cash out of the bank? And the answer is absolutely after the fact. I mean, once people wake up to the idea that, uh-oh, and just one more comment, it's kind of funny, but it isn't. And that's when we had the 2008 crisis. Guess who was running down to the ATMs? The Wall Streeters. Not the man on the street. The Wall Streeters knew what the heck was going on, scared to death, and worried about an ultimate collapse. And
the phrase ICE 9 is something I took from a very famous author named Kurt Vonnegut. Most people have heard of Kurt Vonnegut. He wrote a book, a great book, I highly recommend it, in the 1960s called Cat's Cradle. And the theme of Cat's Cradle, there was a physicist who had invented or discovered an isotope of water, and he called it ICE 9. And it had a couple characteristics. Number one, it was frozen at room temperature. And if you poured it, it was liquid at room temperature. And if you poured it into water, it would turn the water into ice. So if ICE 9 came in contact with H2O, it turned the H2O into ice. But that would spread. And so and he just had a little vial of it. He gave one each to his 3 children. And if you poured it into a stream, let's say, the stream would freeze, but so would the river and the ocean and all the seas, and the entire planet would turn to ice, and life on Earth would cease. So it was a doomsday machine. This was written during the Cold War, during the time when everyone was concerned about nuclear warfare probably should still be concerned, but that was a big topic at the time. So what I did, I took Kurt Vonnegut's idea and the name ICE9, and I brought it over into financial markets and capital markets. And I said, because a lot of people talk about, shutting stock exchanges. We hear it today. In fact, in the U.S., we have these so-called circuit breakers, and they've been going off with regularity the past couple of weeks, where if the market drops a certain amount, they shut the market. Now, they just shut it for 15 minutes, then they reopen, and then if it falls further to another predetermined threshold, they shut it for a longer period of time. And if it happens too late in the day, they close the market for the day, and then they reopen the next day. So that's something like ICE9, but it's a little different than shutting the exchange, which has happened. In 1914, for example, at the beginning of World War I, the New York Stock Exchange was closed from roughly August 1st to December 1st, 1914. So there you had a case where it was closed for 5 months. So when people say, well, these things will never happen, well, the answer is they have happened, and they do happen. The market was closed for, I think, 4 or 5 days after 9/11. For that matter, the market closes every weekend. So these kinds of market closures are not out of the question, and they have happened. But the point I was making, this is where the ICE9 analogy comes in. If you close one venue, and let's just say the New York Stock Exchange, because it's going straight down, the markets are disorderly, too much wealth is being lost, and they close the New York Stock Exchange. Those who need liquidity, those who want cash, will go to another venue. They'll start taking money out of their money market funds. Well, then what does that mean? Well, the money market fund sponsors have to sell assets, commercial paper, treasury bills, and other instruments to meet the redemptions. So then you have to close the money market funds. So then what do people do? Well, they'll go to the banks, and they'll start taking all their money out of their bank accounts and the ATMs. And then so they'll have to close the banks and close the ATMs. And the point is, it spreads from stock exchange to money market funds to banks to other venues, the same way that the original ICE9 would spread from a river to the ocean to the entire world. That's a danger of this kind of spreading that you have to think about before you close the first venue. Closing the first venue won't do you any good if you're just going to go to other venues and have to close them also. So in effect, if you want to close anything, you might have to close everything, shut down the system, call a timeout, and then in some fashion reboot the system, perhaps with something like a new Bretton Woods conference or the intervention of the IMF, et cetera. So that's ICE9 at a very high level and a very global level.
We've seen, I've talked about the increase in cyber attacks, 50% surge in sophisticated cyber attacks, what we call the Gen 5 attacks, what can become the next cyber pandemic. We finished the year with Sunburst, one of the most sophisticated, if not the most sophisticated attacks that the world has seen, targeting US government organization, targeting some of the largest companies in the world. And to tell you the truth, to this date, we actually don't know exactly what damage it caused, because it did a very good job as a Gen 5 attack to hide itself, to steal a lot of data, and to cover all the traces. So this was one example of a security officer nightmare, how to prevent that attack. And by the way, I think that we weren't that bad in preventing that, if the technology is used right. Another good example is what's happened last month. The Emotet infrastructure for distributing malware, that was one of the most sophisticated, again, most damaging infrastructure that we've seen in the world, affected last year 1 out of 5 organizations around the world to distribute all kinds of malware. And this was a great success. Law enforcement from 8 countries were able to stop this network, to take down the network. This is great, a great achievement for law enforcement. But let's think about it for us. This network was active since 2014. It took 7 years to take it down, and during those years we had to defend ourselves. So we can't rely on the time it will take to take this network down. We have to defend against that from day zero, from the first attack, so we are not becoming the next victim.
We
you're warning about the cyber pandemic. How much worse did the COVID-19 pandemic make all of this as the digital economy moved online?
Good afternoon, great to be here. And indeed, the COVID period made ransomware much, much worse than it was before. We've seen an attack of over 93% in ransomware attack compared to a year ago. You've quoted the average ransom that's being paid, which is not trivial anymore. We were talking about starting from hundreds and thousands of dollars on enterprises and going up to tens of millions of dollars on paid ransom.
What are the consequences of all this, besides the fact that companies and potentially governments are going to have to pay these ransomware attacks or pay up in Bitcoin to get their data? What ultimately is going to happen with all this data that's been stolen?
I think the first, many of these attacks are activated by private organizations, private criminals, but some of these attacks are also behind them. There is government-sponsored attack. And second, I mean, we've already seen with the Colonial Pipeline and with many others, it's not just stealth of data. It's shutdown of critical infrastructure. And we've seen it with Colonial Pipeline. We've seen it with hospitals. We've seen it with factories that were shut down. And that's something that we should be really, really worried about, especially if it's used by not just by people that want our money, but by terrorist organizations or foreign governments that I'm sure are watching that and have more, bigger powers than what we've seen so far.
To what extent, Gil, has Bitcoin and crypto more broadly allowed these attacks to take off onto a new tier because of the sort of lack of money laundering controls and regulation?
I wouldn't blame Bitcoin about that. I think the situation on cyber started way before Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin, like many other modern infrastructures, allowed the attackers to monetize in a better way. But again, I'm in this business for now almost 30 years, and we've seen an increase all the time, even before Bitcoin was invented.
So who are the worst actors? Which countries? What type of entities?
I think that the situation is it's not who are the worst attackers, but the fact that once an electronic tools of attack is being used, everybody can get access to it. And in many cases, it's being sold. There are networks that you can really go in and rent the attack tools. You don't have to be the hacker. You don't have to be the sophisticated tech guy. You need to be the one that will. By the way, the business model there is revenue share. It's like 50-50 or 60-40 between the people who develop the tool and the people who are actually activating that. And that's one of the worst things about cyber attacks, that basically every kid in the world can have access to strategic weapons that may have been developed. By the way, we've seen some of these tools have been developed even by the US government and used against the US a year or two later.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.
What do you know? Look at that. Look at that. Crisis becoming bigger than that, guys. Power grid, banking, Swift to be readjusted. Why? So what's the catalyst for Swift to be readjusted? It has to be this. What other catalyst can it be? Maybe different variants, but it has to be a cyber pandemic, guys. Wow. Interesting, to say the least. Guys, if you guys need a ledger, I do have a ledger affiliate link down below, so you guys can go ahead and buy one, because remove your coins from these exchanges, guys. You guys want to be prepared.
Now, check this out. Now they're over here talking about that XRP payments can be made offline. XRP transactions can be made offline. And now they're coming with the prototype. Now they have the prototype, which, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Because, when people at the XRP labs start to work that magic, start to move them hands, they're going to make it work. Let's get into it. Offline payments may soon appear in the XRP ledger. As the developers of the XRP Ledger Labs, the software company behind XRPL-based digital payment solutions, recently announced a prototype payment proof protocol. During a presentation at the Apex Developers Summit in Tallinn, XRP Ledger Labs developers demonstrated XPOP, a proof of payment protocol equipped with a blockchain to initiate XRP Ledger-based transactions without an internet connection. Which just makes XRP even more dangerous. Woo! Which makes it even more better. Crazy. Isn't that crazy? It just keeps getting better and better and better and better. You hear all this stuff, and then you think XRP can't just explode to $2,000 when the flip is switched.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. I'm Brad Garlinghouse. I'm the CEO of Ripple. Blockchain and crypto use cases like cross-border payments are firmly outside the sandbox stage. And more recently, things like NFTs have continued to push crypto into the mainstream consciousness. It's very clear to me that different blockchains have and will have different use cases. There are going to be a lot of winners at the end of the day. This is and will be a multi-chain world. It's all about unlocking boundaries. We're here today because we believe in bridges between traditional financial systems and the new world of crypto-enabled systems, not boundaries. This is about expanding access to the global economy for all by interconnecting previously siloed systems and walled gardens.
RippleNet was designed so that customers seeing the benefits of our fiat-based network could flip the switch to ODL once the market was mature enough. And this is exactly what's happening. RippleNet was designed so that customers seeing the benefits of our fiat-based network could flip the switch, flip the switch, flip the switch, flip the switch.
You have a switch that you can flip whenever you're ready to handle real money. You have a switch that you can flip whenever you're ready to handle real money.
This is crazy. 10 countries have simulated a cyber attack on the global financial system. Israel, who we know is ahead of everything. If you want to know the future, look at Israel and look at China, okay? Led a 10-country simulation of a global cyber attack on the global financial system. This simulated a war game, which was over 10 days. The simulation had sensitive data emerging on the dark web. I've been warning about this for months now, like 8 months, okay? It used fake news reports that in the scenario caused chaos in global markets and a run on banks. We've been talking about a run on banks in this past week. It caused a run on banks. Okay, so they're telling you exactly what's going to happen. This is going to happen, right? So if we go down, we see that this included the United States, Israel, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Thailand. So no China. Like, it doesn't list China. It lists Thailand here. There is no China. So I believe that the cyber attack is going to come from China because they are one of the countries that's not preparing here and simulating this. The goal of this was to simulate the attack, right? And then see if they can respond. Look at this. It says the banks are appealing for emergency liquidity assistance in a multitude of currencies to put a halt to the chaos as counterparties withdraw their funds and limit access to liquidity, leaving the banks in disarray and ruin. Who can provide on-demand liquidity? XRP. Ripple can provide on-demand liquidity when the banks are appealing for emergency liquidity. Dude, it is so obvious. How do you protect yourself from this? Get your crypto offline. Get a Ledger Nano X. If you want a Ledger Nano X, in the description, I have a link there. Click that. It helps me out, and you get a Ledger Nano X. Get your crypto offline, stack up some meals that last forever, and stack up some water. That's all you can do, because we will probably have something like this where the internet is fully disconnected. This is a unlisted video from the World Economic Forum, and basically they say that something is in a matter of days, the whole internet is disconnected, and it's basically like a big cyber attack. It would cost our economies $50 billion a day, every day, right? 1 day without the internet, a single day without the internet costs our economy $50 billion US dollars. It would be irreversible damages. They would have to reset the financial system.
Exclusive IMF 10 countries simulate cyber attack on global finance. Oh my guys, what? They simulate a cyber attack on the global financial system. Okay, so this is basically what's going to happen, guys. The timeline. So what's going to take place is they're already doing these pre-planned events, right? Trying to prepare for when they actually throw on and do the real cyber attack on the current financial global system. When that takes place, it's going to go down. There's going to be people panicking. All of these things are going to take place, and there's going to be a problem, reaction, solution, right? Where they throw XRP into the play. But it's absolutely mind-boggling because they tell people what's going to happen first before them actually taking action upon it. All ties in, guys, with this tweet as well from Val Dresser. Pay attention. This is a drum they keep beating. Inside job. Again, remember, all pre-planned ahead of time. Look at this, guys. We don't make these things up. Devastating solar storm could send mankind back to dark age in doomsday forecast. So we have these things, right? What is this? Warning, devastating solar storms. And we have, what is this? Simulates a cyber attacks of simulations. So from what I see is there's obviously going to be an event that takes down the current financial system. Why? Why do they want to do that? Oh, to make the new financial system rise from the ashes of the current financial system. Guys, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Why? Because this ties in with this tweet as well from Seeking Anon as well. The US could turn off the internet and yet still have internet. SpaceX, they could turn off the internet and still have money. XRP and XLM. Do you understand this? The entire globe could lose power. There would be still internet and money available for use. So guys, this is absolutely insane because this all ties in with all these tweets, right? Ripple releases prototype version of XPOP, the software that will enable users to make payments without internet using XRPL. Again, it's all happening. Look at this image right here, guys. Isn't this insane? Wow. So guys, look at this. The software that will enable users to make payments through their devices without being on the internet. Guys, tell me how XRP isn't the one. XRP is truly the one, like we have been stating for years now, right? It's absolutely in front of our faces. It all ties in with all of these tweets, guys. Pay attention.
As just the other day, we saw this break on Nasdaq.com as the IMF and 10 countries simulate a cyber attack on the global financial system. What the hell is going on? 2 years ago, they simulated a health crisis. Then 1 month later, after that simulation, it happened. Now, they're simulating a cyber attack on the global financial system after the World Economic Forum has been marketing a potential cyber pandemic. Oh, good Lord, guys, the bull has been calling for a cyber attack and potential blackouts for a long time now. And now, they are literally trialing the excuse for the next financial collapse. The simulated cyber attack evolved over 10 days, with sensitive data emerging on the dark web along with fake news reports that ultimately caused chaos in global markets and a run on the banks. Remember when I told all of you, banks are not safe. In my opinion, keep your crypto offline on your Ledger Nanos, and if you need stable coins in the form of USDC, protect that as well. They stated the simulation featured several types of attacks that impacted global foreign exchange and bond markets, liquidity, integrity of data, and transaction between importers and exporters. And these events are creating havoc in the financial markets. Ladies and gentlemen, look at how they're priming the subconscious minds of the masses by releasing this type of information. It is, in my opinion, a foregone conclusion that this is going to be the narrative used to collapse markets and to bring on the new quantum financial system, the cyber attack resistant system. The problem, reaction, solution narrative is at play. Problem, cyber attack, reaction, bail-ins, financial collapse. People are afraid. Solution, let's bring on these digital currencies, this blockchain tech, these digital assets to save the day. It's clear to me, and I hope it's clear to all of you. In addition, we see the Canada Revenue Agency a couple days ago stating that some of their services were offline due to security vulnerability. Yet something else to pay attention to. The systemic digital risk these financial institutions have is massive, and our cryptos are the solution they need.
A cyber attack from Russia is possibly on the way. European and US regulators are telling banks right now to prepare for a Russian cyber attack threat. So I've been telling you this for months and months, but just recently, back in December, IMF and 10 countries simulated a cyber attack on the global financial system. Just as a reminder, the participants in the simulation did not include Russia. It was the US, the UK, the UAE, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Thailand, as well as people from the IMF, the World Bank, and Bank of International Settlements. So you guys can see the narrative is being created right now. Back when this was happening in December, I was trying to guess who they were going to put the blame on for the cyber attack. Looking clearer and clearer that it might be Russia. Let me know what you guys think.
All of the events that's going on right now, you know what I'm saying? All the events that's going on right now, they're all leading up to XRP being the global reserve currency. You know, the stuff with the cyber attack, with the solar storm that they're talking about that could come as well. Things like that is what's going to move the price of XRP and determine the outcome of all cryptocurrencies. So pay attention to all the global events that's happening, and notice how all these global events is happening at the same time of the Ripple and SEC court case. You understand what I'm saying? So with that being said, they have to come with certain narratives that could switch the current financial system to the new financial system, to XRP and things like that. You understand what I'm saying? So basically, when these certain current events take place, understand what I'm saying? That's what's going to move the price of XRP. Once the global financial system collapses, which is exactly what it looks like right now. You understand what I'm saying when they're talking about the internet going out or cyber attack and the stuff that's going on around the world with Russia? All this stuff is linked together with XRP and leading XRP to being the global reserve currency, and all the ISO 20022 coins like Algorand, IOTA, XLM. The world that we're heading into with these current events happening is what's going to put XRP as a global reserve currency. It's a plan within a plan, and also all of the ISO 20022 coins as well. So pay attention to the events that's happening that's going to push everything towards a new financial system. You understand what I'm saying? So I just wanted to share that with you guys today. It's XRP Vel here. Like, comment, subscribe, share my videos, keep my post notifications on. Let's get into it, guys. Peace out.
We've been hearing for a long time that one of the ways a Russian invasion could start is with cyber attacks designed to hamstring Ukrainian communications. So is this the cyber attack that we've been watching for?
Well, this is what's called a denial of service cyber attack, in which you just flood a website with so many hits that it crashes. And they've done that to some Ministry of Defense websites and some state-owned bank websites in Ukraine. But the Russians are capable of much, much more than that. They basically have the capability to shut down all digital communications in, say, the capital of Kyiv. So on the scale of what the Russians are capable of, these rank sort of as nuisance attacks. And I think if they are precursors to an invasion, they are the early precursors designed to sow confusion and maybe even panic. Because, of course, when you start taking down the websites of banks, people start to worry about their savings. But the attacks that people expect ahead of a Russian invasion would be much more severe and might well include airstrikes as well as cyber attacks.
Okay? So the plans, I always told people there's plans within plans, okay? So pandemonium is about to happen. You know what I'm saying? They're literally putting everything in place. They're putting everything in place for the new financial switch, for the global reset. Okay? And I'm gonna tell you why. Because first of all, Russia is not gonna attack Ukraine. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because Russia knows if they attack Ukraine, Russia knows that the U.S. is going to make money because the U.S. makes billions and billions and billions of dollars from war. So you want to know what's going to be the next war? It's going to be a cyber attack. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be a cyber attack. Because the only way that Russia could sit here and do an attack without having the U.S. make any money from all of those tanks and everything that they buy or whatever, the only way they could attack without the U.S. making money from war is from a cyber attack. So what's going to happen with the cyber attack? It's going to send a global shock. The whole internet infrastructure is going to collapse. It's going to shut off, going to go down. And the internet, we need the internet. Everybody lives on the internet. You pay your bills. You pay your bills on the internet. What else you do? You buy your groceries on the internet. They buy the Federal Reserve buys endless amounts of stocks from the endless amount of money that they print on the internet. And all of that shuts down. What happens when the global internet infrastructure shuts down from an EMP or a cyber attack? What happens? Money velocity stops. The money velocity stops instantly. And what happens when the money velocity stops and the whole global financial system shuts down or shuts off because of a cyber attack? What happens? I'll tell you what happens. The whole reset happens. Because once the money velocity slows down and it stops, the whole system collapses. And once the whole system collapses, guess what? We need something to save the system, right? And what's the only thing that can save the system? What's the only crypto? What's the only digital currency? What's the only virtual currency that can save the system and does transactions offline and can provide on-demand liquidity instantly when the whole global financial infrastructure shuts down? XRP. So they have the plan all planned out. This whole Russia-Ukraine thing is all a part of the plan. Just like I say, it's always plan within plans.
What we see is the Russian attack appears to be coming in the next few days, according to Western leaders. But if you talk to anybody else, especially Ukraine, it's already started in cyberspace. Yesterday, the Ukrainian government reported the largest cyber attack in the nation's history. Both Ukraine's defense ministry, army, and the country's two largest banks were breached. While it's not yet confirmed that Russia was behind the attack, Ukraine says the adversary is most likely the one who is behind it. Russia and Belarus responsible for a separate cyber attack that hit Ukraine's government websites last month. Let's bring in top cybersecurity expert and CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz. George, give me your sense of what is really happening here. And I mean, to me, it seems obvious that it's the Russians because it's a pile-on at the moment. We know that they might be trying this false flag operation where skirmishes start at the borders that appear to be from other groups or countries, not Russia. So that kind of forces Ukraine to swipe and take a shot at them. And then suddenly all bets are off and you've got a war. Not to mention, they're trying to pile on with the cybersecurity attacks.
Absolutely. When you look at where we are today in 2022, cyber is a critical element of any warfare fighting capabilities. We think about air, land, sea. Cyber is just as important, and why it's important is because of the damage that you can actually do. You think about taking out the power grids, critical infrastructure, gas line, pipelines. I mean, the list goes on, and Russia has certainly a history of taking out things like the electrical grid in 2015. Not only are you talking about taking out critical infrastructure, but there's a big psychological operations element to this, scaring the citizens of the Ukraine, creating turmoil within the country, potentially false flags. So big element, and obviously I think everyone is waiting to see how this unfolds.
George, security experts in the United States are warning companies, everyone, not just publicly traded, but the smaller companies here in the U.S., saying that we could see a spillover effect when it comes to all kinds of hacks.
Breaking news, Warriors. I literally just did a TikTok about Bloomberg talking about the Russia-Ukraine narrative and the SWIFT system. Literally right after I posted that, this article was sent to me. Check this out. Ukraine Defense Ministry, banks hit by cyber attack amid tensions with Russia. Warriors, if you haven't checked out my YouTube channel, click right here, click the link in my bio, watch the YouTube videos I just did the last 2 days, walking you through the exact narrative of what's happening right now. We are now heading into the war narrative, which is going to change the banking system as you know it. It is going to be about cyber attacks and the weak SWIFT system. And the hero is going to be distributed ledger technology, things like XRP, ISO 20022, and those who held on like a tick on a dog are going to change their family generation. Warriors, get your shit together. Check out the videos. Okay, so yesterday, as I was breaking news, as I was sharing these articles, Ukraine Defense Ministry bank hit by cyber attack amid the tensions with Russia. So as we're talking about this, Russia hits Ukraine with a cyber attack and attacks their banking system. Whereas, do you literally see your portfolio being played out in a positive way? The new system is rolling in, Warriors. The new system is rolling in. Here it is. We know, thank you to compact.nl. Okay, this is the SWIFT system timeline here. Okay, America integration, the ISO 20022 starts now in 2021, and then it goes all the way through 2023. It'll be fully implemented. The narrative right now is the SWIFT system with Ukraine and Russia and America, and we're implementing it in 2021, going into 2022, and in America, it'll be fully implemented by 2023. This shows you the timelines all the way through 2025. By 2025, you have a brand new banking system that's going to be ran by distributed ledger technology. JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, they're buying land in the metaverse. They already have JPM coin. You have R3, you have Consensus, you have Algorand, you have XLM, you have XRP. Everything is connecting. Go to Consensus, look up Consensus, Warriors. I got into QNT finally. I take my time. I got into QNT, so I'm dollar cost averaging in. Probably a little bit too late, but I'm not. That's not a recommendation, but I dollar cost average in when I figure out that that's what I want to get into. So QNT, I'm now into QNT, and I'm dollar cost averaging into QNT.
You have to have as many on and off ramps as possible. That makes you a versatile crypto investor. That means when the bull run comes, you have options. That means you're not subject to withdrawal limits, so you can have numerous exchanges you're withdrawing from as well. Let's think of it this way too. Some of you still don't have your damn hardware wallets. What are you procrastinating on? I don't even have an affiliate link because I don't care about making money. The Ledger Nano X. Get a Ledger Nano X. It's a small price to pay for maximum security, in my opinion. Offline hardware wallets. An ounce of prevention beats a pound of cure. 30 minutes to set up a Ledger Nano can save you 6 figures or more if you get hacked from an exchange. Another wallet is the Decent wallet that I highly recommend for coins like Hedera Hashgraph and others. Keep this in mind. A lot of you don't even know where to stake some of your coins. Look up where to stake your certain coins. These are all things you need to do. Stop procrastinating and building your crypto infrastructure, because I believe this space will 100x when it's all said and done, and in a relatively short period of time, unlike anything else you could get into in the world. Don't hate yourself. Stop procrastinating. Stop being lazy. There's money to be made every single day, and it's up to your effort level. There's some people that haven't even claimed their songbird yet and can from their ledgers, from their wallets. I'm not talking about you people on exchanges. I'm talking about the individuals that just haven't done it yet. I'm talking to you. There's money and passive income to be made. My question to you is, why do you hate yourself?
The pandemic has radically changed the world as we know it, and the actions we take today as we work to recover will define our generation.
Now is the time to think what history would say about this crisis.
2020 has been challenging on a lot of levels, as economic, environmental, and societal frailties have been laid bare. But it's also proved that when we need to, we can act rapidly and restructure our lives.
The recovery from the pandemic is an opportunity. We can see rays of hope in the form of a vaccine, but there is no vaccine for the planet. Nature needs a bailout.
You don't want to go back to the status quo that you had before simply because it was the status quo that got us here.
With everything falling apart, we can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before. Ways that better address so many of the challenges we face. And that's why so many are calling for a great reset. A great reset? That sounds more like buzzword bingo masking some nefarious plan for world domination. Hands up, this kind of slogan hasn't gone down well. But all we really want to say is that we all have an opportunity to build a better world. And it's not surprising that people who've been disenfranchised by a broken system and pushed even further by the pandemic will suspect global leaders of conspiracy. But the world's not that simple. Every one of us has differing priorities, values, and ideas. That's part of why solutions are so hard to come by, and why we all need to be involved in the decision-making. Because whether it's politicians, CEOs, academics, activists, or you, we're all about getting people together, even those you may not like, to sit down at the table and develop solutions that work for all of us. But
we need enormous trust between the private sector and the public sector for this to actually work. That trust is hard to come by.
it's time for people to work together, listen to each other, and build this trust so we can move towards a better world. And we really need one. Because while the pandemic affects us all, it's clear it affects some more than others.
The first people who are hit are the people at the front, those who are vulnerable. It is those on the front line who take it first, and that is simply unacceptable.
See, at the start of 2020, 1% of the world's population owned 44% of the wealth. And since the start of the pandemic, billionaires have increased theirs by more than 25%, whilst 150 million people fell back into extreme poverty. And with climate change set to dwarf the damage caused by the pandemic, the message from 2020 should be abundantly clear.
Capitalism, as we know it, is dead. This obsession that we have had with maximizing profits for shareholders alone has led to incredible inequality and a planetary emergency.
But no one can do this alone, and top-down approaches won't get us anywhere, because everything we've learned in our work has shown us that diverse voices lead to better results. And it's for these reasons that the forum talks about something called stakeholder capitalism, which would shift businesses away from just profit. Because
if we want to change where the focus of our recovery will go, then we need a new dashboard for the new economy. And that needs to encompass people, planet, prosperity, and institutions.
Giving people a real stake in the economy and putting well-being before growth. And that's all about getting the right people in the right place at the right time.
We must rebuild our relationship with nature for the survival of the peoples and our planet.
We have a window of time which is closing, and we need everybody who cares to get together and find solutions now.
It's the people who have great ideas and who share them with others. They're the ones who are shaping the future. So if you want to be a part of the change, then tune in, turn on, and get involved. Follow the Davos Agenda, right here, online, on YouTube.